right. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time today to attend the Homeownership Capacity Program training. If you participated in the program last year or any year before that, you'll probably remember that we did an in-person training in years past. But now that we've got more seasoned organizations, we decided to go to a webinar instead and just focus on the changes in the program. And then we'll talk about this a little bit later too, but November 2nd, we will have a more in-depth in-person training if you'd like a little bit more information than what we cover on the call today. So I'll go ahead and carry us through. Just one reminder, there is a handout section that you should see. As part of the webinar, I did pull in the PowerPoint for today. So if you did register for this call after I sent out the PowerPoint materials this morning, you're able to access that. And then also I've got Cheryl Rice, who's co-piloting with me today. She'll be monitoring our chat and question box. Everyone's line is muted, but if you do have any questions as we go, please feel free to write that in the question box, and we'll answer that at the appropriate time. I think everyone is familiar with our mission. We've got that here on this slide. All right, so today for the agenda, we will be going through a quick year-end summary, and it's actually more a summary from the start of the program to now. And then we'll be going through and focusing on the client file document changes. Do a quick refresher on the client file checklist for what's required to retain in the client file at each stage. Talking about a few program changes, and then we'll end our time with other notables. So like I said, we'll start off here with some program data. This data is from the start of the Homeownership Capacity Program, so back in August 2014 through September 30th, 2017. And most of the data here will focus on clients that are coming into the program. So I won't go through all of the data in each slide, but in summary, 88% of households that have come into the program were households of color or Hispanic ethnicity. And I will say we've had over 2,000 clients actually enter the program now at this point in time. So some of these slides, because of the earlier years, they're missing data. So not all of these slides will add up to the 2018 clients that we have in the system. But most of these slides get pretty close to that. So for barriers at program entry, 66% of clients identified credit as their primary barrier to homeownership. You'll see more of that breakdown in a following slide. And that's followed by 17% of clients identifying savings as their primary barrier to homeownership. Looking at credit score at program entry, we've got the breakdown here from no score all the way up to 680 plus. We've got 66% of households served did not have a credit score or had a credit score below 620. So certainly a lot of opportunity to work with clients in that capacity. And the next slide here, we've got AMI at program entry. So currently we're at 77% of households served. We're at or below 50% AMI. And then this next slide here focuses on outcomes. So at this point in time, we've had 363 clients reach program completion. So that's 18%. 295 of those we have outcomes on at this point in time. And that's the breakdown that you see on that slide. So 64% of those 295 clients have purchased a home. 19% have decided not to purchase, and 17% at that 1 year mark past program completion are still pursuing homeownership. Of all of the clients that have entered the program, 20% have stopped communication at some point in the process. You know, we were looking at this data this morning and feel like that is still reasonable, especially given the longer term commitment that the clients do make to this program. You know, there's certainly an expectation that some clients will fall off at some point in time. And so the 20% still appears to be really within the reasonable range for a program model like this. So now we'll switch gears and take a look at client file document or client file document changes. So first off, we'll just do a quick reminder of the forms that have had no content changes. So if you're kind of going through your list of forms, you know, we want to speak to the forms that haven't had any changes since last year. So those forms include the client survey, the outcome data form, the action plan, and the standards and measures. So different from last year, you are not required this year to use any of the forms with clients that we have on our website. You are required, though, to use the content of those forms. So, you know, we recognize with the client survey or the outcome data form, you know, you may have other items that you're collecting on clients, either that your organization wishes to track or that you need to track for other funding sources. So, you know, rather than having multiple forms for, you know, different programs, we're saying go ahead, you know, take the data that's required to be collected as part of the client survey and incorporate that into any other client surveys that you're conducting on clients at program completion. The same with outcome data form and the action plan. And then the standards and measures, as you probably remember, that is more of a document that's not going to be used with clients, but it's measuring the outcomes within your program. You know, looking at credit score changes for clients, debt reduction, and things like that. So that's why that doesn't have that our website, and you're more than welcome to do that. They are set up as fillable forms for you, so they should be ready to use. But please purge any versions that you have that are dated prior to October 1st, 2017. Our logo has changed, so we're turning over to the new logo. We're really happy with one major change over the last year, which is changing the coaching agreement and then the disclosure form and combined Privacy Act notice and Tennyson warning. So, you know, we heard that feedback loud and clear last year at the kickoff event, you know, that a lot of organizations are not sure when clients are coming in, which route they're going to go. You know, will they work with the homeownership capacity program, or will they need homebuyer counseling? And so we worked with the Homeownership Center here over the last year and created a streamlined form that now includes the HECAT and HUD requirements. And I will specify that the HUD requirements are specific to if the Homeownership Center is your intermediary. If not, you would, you know, want to look back at the requirements to make sure that whatever changes we referenced in our forms also reflects what's required with your HUD agreement. But this really allows you to hopefully use this for all three of these funding sources, as well as modify it to include any other funding sources that you may have that with similar requirements. The forms, as you hopefully know by now, are modifiable, so you can include other funding requirements or other funder requirements, as well as your organization's logo. And last week I did send out the Word version of both of those forms, so you should be able to start working on those now with some ease. And then just one note is before the end of December, we will collect those streamlined forms used by your organization just to do a double check and make sure that they do include all of those requirements. There's only one change to the process guide that we'll get to in a minute, but just a reminder is at the beginning of every program year, it's always good to just do a double check and make sure that the data that we require for the homeownership capacity has been incorporated into your intake forms and budgets. You know, we'll be having another webinar here within the next few months to talk about some of the monitoring findings. But one common piece that I will notate, you know, is savings. That's been somewhat tough to find in the budgets that we've pulled. So just make sure that you're going back and doing that double check to make sure that all of the required data fields are incorporated into your forms. We did include one additional question this year as part of the required data collection fields in the data collection system. And that is providing a brief explanation for how clients that are at or below 30% AMI will be able to achieve homeownership. Just a reminder, the explanations do not have to be lengthy, but they should include certain details. We give some examples here. The client is currently in school with plans to graduate and work full-time within the next 2 years, or the client is working with a job coach and appears to be making progress towards increasing income. Again, just a reminder, you know, while I think we all agree that financial wellness services are beneficial for anyone that's interested, this funding source is really for clients that have the goal of homeownership with barriers that can be achieved within 3 years' time. If you have questions about this, certainly feel free to contact your organization contact. We'll talk about that in a few minutes if your contact was previously Kevin. Otherwise, I'm always available to talk through that with you further. But that is something that we will be looking for, you know, as part of your what you're entering into the data collection system. So this is just a quick refresher then on the client file and what we're looking for at each of these different stages of the process. So with intake, and these, this list has not changed from last year. So again, this is just a refresher to make sure that as you're completing your client files, as you're providing oversight over client files, if you're a program manager, that you are making sure that all these pieces are in place. So for the intake, you know, you're going to want to include your intake form and budget, anything that supports the data that you're putting into the data collection system. As you remember, with intake, you're pulling a credit report as well and pulling some data from that. So you'll want to retain the credit report in the client file. And then you'll have your own coaching agreement disclosure form, as well as the Combined Privacy Act notice and Tennyson warning. So we'll be looking to make sure that both of those are in the client file, as well as the action plan and then your case notes. For the annual data collection, you will, again, be providing information that you collected with that client during their annual follow-up. So most of the time that's going to be a budget as well as a credit report that you'll be pulling again at the annual check-in, and then your continued case notes on your interactions. I will remind you too, with case notes, you know, between your intake and annual check-in with the client, please make sure to continue to notate your interactions with the client throughout the year. The case notes are really helpful for us as we monitor client files to give some context to what we're seeing, and that can kind of help to piece together a little bit what some of the client story is. And then program completion, again, any documents to support the items that you're reporting. The credit report that you pulled at program completion, the client survey, the action plan, and the case notes. And then the outcome data collection. So that is the outcome that you're collecting within that year after the client has reached program completion. You'll want to provide the outcome data form or the form that you're using with the content from our outcome data form pulled into it, as well as the case notes. So we will move on here to other programmatic changes. So of course, with the new year, there's going to be a new reporting schedule with due dates. So just a reminder to review and update your calendar with the due dates for this coming program year. With the expenditure report, we have changed, I think, in a way that you'll like, to semi-annual reporting rather than quarterly on your expenditures. One piece that has changed, and this will kind of just line us up better with program monitoring, is that at the time that you complete and submit your semi-annual expenditure report, we'll also be collecting your general ledger with that, as well as any narrative explaining reasoning for any expenditures exceeding the originally budgeted amount. So I know you're all probably familiar with the fact that we've been collecting your budgets now that you're aware of the award. And so you'll be using that same form to report on the expenditures, and we'll be kind of monitoring those expenditures against what you've reported. So if for some reason at the time of your reporting on the first 6 months of expenditures, any expenses are exceeding what you had budgeted, that's where we'll be asking for a narrative as well. So those will be the 3 items that you'll submit with your expenditure report in April. And then the narrative report, we are, just to make it consistent with the timeline for the expenditure report, we'll be moving to collecting that semi-annually as well, rather than quarterly. One other change, unfortunately, the online survey tool that we were using, the format that it would put the responses into wasn't user-friendly. And so we do have a fillable form that's posted on our website that we ask that you use for reporting, but the questions are all the same. The disbursement schedule and model has changed this year quite a bit, and so I want to make sure that we take a couple minutes to talk about that. Consistent with last year, once we have the fully executed grant contract in place, we will be dispersing the first 25% of the total award. And then what we're moving to after that will be a reimbursement model. So for the remaining disbursements, we'll be looking quarterly at what the production is for each organization, or specifically households served, over that initial 25%, and processing disbursements after that. Or like I said, on a quarterly basis, processing disbursements based on the household served. And specifically how we'll arrive at the total is we'll take a look at the number of households and we'll multiply that by the amount per client. And if you're wondering about that, please take a look at Exhibit A, which is attached to the grant contract for further details on that. And one thing that I will be doing too is I'll be sending out, in advance of processing the disbursement, the total number of households that I see in the system and what the anticipated disbursement would be, and giving all of you a window of time to respond if you've got a different number. So that'll make sure that we're both on the same page, first of all, with the numbers that are reflected in the data collection system. And making sure, of course, then that the disbursement that's going out the door is correct in the first place. So we were really thoughtful about wanting, again, the program and the data entry requirements to not be too cumbersome for organizations. So we are continuing to require that all reporting be done on a quarterly basis, but we do really want to encourage you to enter your data on a monthly basis for a couple of reasons. So we will, we do look on an ongoing basis at what's the numbers that are in the data collection system because we do that for monitoring over the incentive fund to get a sense of what organizations may be accessing the incentive fund and what we'll have available for funds or if we'll have enough funds available. Also, especially around RFP time, you know, as we're going into the spring and summer months, we do look at least twice within the data collection system at production, and a lot of that informs what we do for awards. So I know last year, as we were going into that time, I did send out an email and reminded everyone, if you haven't done so, I know you're in the middle of the quarter, but if you haven't done so, please update your numbers or at least email us with your totals, you know, of clients that you've served since the last reporting date. So I want to encourage organizations to get into that habit. It is beneficial for you in many ways to do that. Like I said, we are not requiring that you do it on a monthly basis because we also want to be thoughtful to the fact that, you know, that would potentially increase some workload on an ongoing basis, but we do want to encourage you to do that on a monthly basis. Our commitment is that we will review the data collection system entries within 15 days after the reporting due date. So if the reporting due date is April 15th, within 15 days after that date, we'll be checking all the numbers in the data collection system, sending out that disbursement spreadsheet where it lays out kind of what we're seeing for numbers, what that disbursement amount would be, and then getting that process or getting that disbursement processed. This will be new for us, so certainly if, you know, if as we're working through this, especially in these next, or within this next quarter here, if there's, you know, input that would make that better, please don't hesitate to let us know. You know, we want this to work well for everyone. So another change this year around eligible use of funds. So as you remember, if you are a HECAT grantee, this is the first year that financial wellness services have been recognized under the HECAT umbrella for eligible service types. So at this time, if you're a grantee under HECAT and you're receiving funding for the one-on-one financial wellness services, you can bill clients to both HECAT and homeownership capacity. So it's a pretty big change from last year. The one piece, because there's quite a bit of funding available now for financial wellness, the only requirement that we have is that homeownership capacity funds cannot be used if the cost to serve the client, if the funding that you receive from all sources exceeds the cost to serve the client, which in most cases isn't going to be a problem, but that is one requirement that we do put in there, and that's consistent with many other grants. I'm just pausing here. It looks like we do have a question in the question box. Okay. So the comment here is just notating that all organizations have their own systems for doing data entry, as some staff I know enter data daily. So, so certainly that's even better, you know, if that's the case. But I know from the standpoint of when I'm looking in the data collection system, you know, there are some organizations that will wait until the end of the quarter and enter all their clients at the same time. And that is one thing that, you know, while that's a minimum requirement, we really want to encourage organizations to to move away from doing that if you can. All right, so for our final section here, we've got some other notables. So we're going to focus specifically on the data collection system. So just a reminder, if someone leaves your organization, please contact us immediately in the homeownership capacity general mailbox. Their account will continue to be available to them until we lock their account. And we can't do that unless we know from you that they have left your organization. And as you know, they can see everything that you can see. So, so from a data protection standpoint, it's really important that you let us know as soon as possible. I know that this year we do have some new users to the data collection system. So I just want to do a reminder here about the training resource. There is a training and a PowerPoint that's available on our website. I believe it's an hour long. So, you know, take a few minutes to go ahead and review that. We are in the process of adding new users now, so I hope to have some information out to you here by the end of the week. If you are a new user with the login information and username and password and everything like that you'll need to get set up in the system. And then we have developed a DCS user guide that will include a lot of the information in the PowerPoint, as well as some additional information that would be useful when using the data collection system. It's going to be complete with screenshots, so want to encourage you to take a look at that. I'll let everyone know once that's posted. We are going to be adding some items to that that I'll talk about in a minute here around pulling reports from SciSense and data requests around that. So we'll get that posted as soon as possible. But in the meantime, that training, the pre-recorded training and PowerPoint is available on our website. So one item that we were hoping to change with some of these recent changes to the data collection system was to be able to turn over the editing ability to our grantees. Unfortunately, due to data integrity concerns, users will not be able to edit. So you'll have to continue to follow the same process to make edits, which will be either to call me or to email the general homeownership capacity email and with the following information. So the intake date, and then parts of the client's first and last name. Email is not a secure way of transmitting private data, so please don't include the client's full name. It will help us, though, if you can include the first and last letter of both their first and last name. That will help us to narrow it down with that and the intake date. And then finally, any edits that are needed. So be sure to tell us which survey in the data collection system needs the edit. So if it's the intake versus the annual versus program completion or outcome, whatever it may be, just make sure to include that, and we will make those edits. I know that we do have some outstanding edits that need to be made, so we are working on that, and we'll let you know once those edits are completed. So the next piece to talk about here is SciSense, which is the data analytics tool that all of the data from the data collection system feeds into. So our goal here within the next few months is to send you what's included on each of the dashboards. For one, so that you can see what SciSense can produce, and two, so you can let us know if there's any discrepancies in the data before we do the program analysis. We're hoping to have that program analysis completed within the first few months of the new year. So we'll be sending out some information on that as soon as we have that pulled together. So look for an email. And then, like I said, please do take some time to look over the data. It will have some of the data that you've already seen here in previous slides around just raw numbers, as well as some of the analytics around credit score change. So number of clients that have had no change in credit score versus an increase or a decrease. So we will get that information out to you here as soon as it's available. And that will hopefully help you too to inform what you may want to ask for in the future if you were to ever ask us to pull a report from SciSense. So kind of in that same note, as I shared before, the DCS user guide will include a request form that we'll ask you to complete. And what that will do is it will outline each of the dashboards, the data that's in it, and what you would like to have pulled. We are asking for 2 weeks notice for dashboards that are preset, and as well as the filters. If there's a specialized report that you need, so for example, that could be you want to look at all the clients that you served in Ramsey County, or you want to look at all the clients that have a credit score below 620 that are within a certain age range. That would be a specialized report. Again, this is all new to us, so we'll have to really kind of take each of the specialized report requests on a request by request approach and determine the timeline, really depending on what the request is. Another reminder here about the financial capability recertification. If your certificate is from 2015 or earlier, it's coming up on the time that you must become recertified. NeighborWorks' website has the continuing education and recertification requirements. And just a reminder that we're going to continue with the requirement under homeownership capacity that at least one person with your organization have that current financial capability certification. So if you haven't looked at the recertification requirements, it's if I'm remembering correctly, I believe it's 30 hours over the last 3 years of continuing education, and I believe 15 of those have to be a NeighborWorks specific training a specific class. So so that will take some thoughtful approach if you have not completed any trainings over the last 3 years with NeighborWorks. So please take a look first at the NeighborWorks website and then give us a call if you have any questions on that. So switching gears to just a few things that are going to be coming up here in the next few months. There will be an optional in-person training, as I referenced before, at our office here on November 2nd from 9 until noon. This will be a more in-depth program training designed as a refresher for those that are new to the program or new to the homeownership capacity program, whether that be a program manager or a coach, or those that just have been with the program for a while but would like a more in-depth refresher on the program requirements. To RSVP, please just email me and I'll be happy to put you on the list, but please do RSVP because we will be sending out some pretty important information in advance of this training about parking, and we also just want to make sure that we've got enough materials for everyone that will be in attendance. We continue to keep a list of peer learning and training topics that are of interest to all of our providers. So I'll be sending out a survey soon to get your thoughts on topics of interest for both peer learning and training opportunities. We have set aside some money for continued training here in this next year. So again, we want to make sure that we are providing opportunities that are relevant to the work that you do on a daily basis. We've unfortunately become a bit delayed with our program monitoring from the 16-17 program year. So within the next few months, we will be scheduling a follow-up call with your organization if there were multiple issues that we'd like to talk through with you and learn more about. Then after that, we will be scheduling a summary webinar just to kind of review the issues that were a little bit more widespread and do some specific training around those. And then we will also be sending out a letter. That letter may include a request to provide additional documentation depending on the findings. And then for program monitoring in the 17-18 year, we will be likely collecting client files. The plan is to request that around the same time that we are collecting the general ledger and expenditure report. That'll be around April 2018. And then we will likely be doing expense testing again. So this slide and the next slide, as you know, each of you have someone here at Minnesota Housing assigned to your organization. You know, part of the reason for that is because there's a little bit more interaction with us on this program than you may experience with other grants. The reason behind that is because this is still in pilot phase and we want to make sure that we're continuing to stay engaged with the organizations that are providing this work, learning from you about what's working and what isn't working. So like I said, on this slide and the next slide, you have the person that you've been assigned to within Minnesota Housing. If you're working with Kevin, it will either be myself or Q Vang. And just in case you don't know what we look like, you've got some pictures here. And that is all the information that I have. We'll pause for just a minute to see if there are any questions before we wrap this up. All right, I'm not seeing anything else come through. Certainly don't hesitate to reach out to either your, let's see. There's one question here about, will the database have numbers added to the client names? And I don't know if this is in connection to client IDs. Such as a numerical order. So no, unfortunately, we don't have that ability. You can sort clients across the top, either by client name or by intake date or annual date, things like that. That's really helpful for making sure that your clients are not overdue in terms of reporting. But in terms of the numbers, there won't be anything that will identify them as, 1, 2, 3 for each of the program years. But like I said, we will be sending out a spreadsheet in advance of processing disbursements. There is still some hand counting that we have to do because occasionally we'll come across a duplicate client in the system that the system wouldn't have caught had we not gone through and done more of a hand counting approach. So we're going to try this where we send out the materials or send out a spreadsheet with the numbers that we have. And certainly, like I said, over time, if you've got feedback on ways that can make the process work more smoothly for you, please let us know. Oh. Yep. So the next question is for contact information for those that you'll be working with here within the organization, and absolutely, I will get that out here after the call. The next question is the new forms. Will they be in fillable PDF format? And the answer is yes. Those are all actually posted on our website now, and you should be able to access those, and they're all set up to be fillable. The only two items that aren't are the disclosure forms and the Privacy Act notice and Tennyson warning. Offered by your organization. Give it just one more second here. These are great questions that are coming through. Thanks so much for asking them. All right. With that, I think we'll wrap up 15 minutes early. Again, don't hesitate to reach out if you have any other questions, you know, after the call here. And we're looking forward to another year. Thank you so much.